noodles. We've got some homemade breadsticks proofing in the oven. And yeah, and then we're going to shape up and wrap up some of our sourdoughs that we'll have to bake up tomorrow. So let's start by getting our meat sauce going. And so I've done a lasagna a couple of times on here, but I'm doing my lasagna tonight kind of in like the meat lovers way. No veggies in sight except for tomato sauce, because that is how my husband loves his lasagna. And I rarely ever make lasagna the way he likes it, because typically when I make it, I'm making it for, like my parents and whatnot, but my mom's going out of town soon. So my stepdad loves lasagna this way as well. So he gets to have it his way, which never happens. So what we're going to put in here is I've got a pound of Italian sausage with a pound of ground beef. We are going to kind of cook this up. I'm going to add some spices to it in a little bit. We'll add some sauce to it, and that is going to be our meat sauce way, which is very different from my other way when I typically add in sauteed onions, peppers, mushrooms, all sorts of deliciousness for this part. But we'll have some happy boys tonight because my son also really likes it this way. He actually doesn't mind the vegetables on it, but all of my kids actually prefer lasagna this way, but they'll eat my other way with veggies in it. Okay, we're going to break these guys up and have it over medium heat, and we're going to let them start cooking up. There we go. And while that's starting to cook up, let's make up our ricotta kind of cheese base for it. So I'm not going to use, this is a pretty big tub of ricotta, and I typically only use 16 ounces. So this is twice as much. So I'm going to use half of this. Let me grab a spoon. But when you use ricotta cheese, there's nothing like diet about lasagna. So don't get a low-fat ricotta cheese. Get the whole milk one. It's creamier. It's better. It's better. So don't skimp on that. We're going to use about, 16 ounces, so about half this tub of ricotta.
You have a question? The sausage you use, is it hot, mild, or sweet?
Mild Italian sausage. So spicy masala. I don't like anything spicy, and I know people are like, oh, hot Italian sausage is not spicy. It's spicy for me. I can't even handle freshly ground black pepper. So mild Italian sausage, and I am not a big fan of sweet Italian sausage. So anytime you see me using Italian sausage, unless I grab the wrong thing at the store by mistake, it will always be just the good old mild Italian sausage. Okay, we've got our ricotta here. We're going to add in some Parmesan cheese. We're going to add in about a cup of Parmesan cheese. Okay. And we're going to add in some mozzarella cheese as well, about a cup. And I just find that using the 3 cheese mixture, ricotta, mozzarella, and Parmesan, gives that base. It makes it to where it's not so creamy, but it has this just nice texture to it. And then my other trick to making my ricotta base taste delicious is I add in a big heaping tablespoon of pesto, because pesto just makes it taste so much more flavorful. Now you have to make sure you have a good pesto if you're not making it yourself. I find there's really only 2 store-bought pestos so far that I've tried that I like. I like Rana's, and I like Costco's pesto. Outside of that, I find that they all have kind of a funky taste to it. But those 2 I found are really, really good. We're going to mix and cream all of these together. Now, normally when I'm making this I do my ones, I load it with veggies, I add in some fresh basil and some spinach in here, chopped up spinach. But again, We're making it the way my husband likes it, which is meat and cheese and sauce. No veggies in sight. And this is actually, Evie will probably like this the best. Break this up. I'm going to turn it up just a smidge. Give it a little toss around. And then on top of the ricotta or the pesto in there, we are going to add in some Italian seasoning, about, I want to say, a teaspoon or so. We're going to also add some to our meat. We're going to add in about a teaspoon and a half, because I do like it to have a little extra pop of flavor. And we're going to add in a little bit of basil. We're going to do about a half a teaspoon, and then about a teaspoon over here. And we have our garlic salt. I'm only going to add a little bit in here because both that Parmesan and that mozzarella is going to add a little bit of seasoning to the ricotta, but I do like to add a bit more from that pesto. So about a half a teaspoon, just a smidge more. And then for this, we're going to add in about a teaspoon of garlic salt because, again, the Italian sausage is already salty enough, but we want a little bit to help out the ground beef. And then I just smash it up because I don't want any really big chunks of meat in my lasagna, but more just nicely ground and where the sausage and the ground beef mix up together. Okay. Let's give our spices mixed in here. And now we've got this nice kind of flavorful ricotta paste base with our cheeses in there that when we bake it up, those are just going to melt up even more and just be absolutely delicious. And it just takes away the monotony of a very plain base. While our meat is cooking there, let's start getting some of our noodles rolled out. So this is some homemade pasta dough that I whipped up not too long ago, about an hour or so ago. Super simple recipe. I used about 2 cups of flour, 3 eggs, a little splash of olive oil, about a teaspoon of salt, actually not even, like a half teaspoon of salt, and just a little bit of water when I wet my hands to work in the dough, because the trick to the best dough is making sure you knead it for at least 10 minutes. And now it's a good arm workout and it's a very stiff dough to begin with. But if you got your kneading done and well, then you're going to have a nice, good elasticity to it. And that's what's going to give you the best one. So we're going to roll out our sheets. The nice thing about fresh pasta dough, you don't have to boil them, which makes them a win. And we're going to roll this out. It's going to stretch it a couple of times. We'll fold it over to get it kind of where we want it. But you can see just the elasticity. It's already stretching really nice. And that's, again, from all of the kneading. Okay. And then this is on a 1, and I'm going to move it to a 2. And I like to make for my lasagna noodles on the KitchenAid setting. I go to a number 4 because I think it gives it enough heartiness to it that you've got a good base, but it's not too thin. And then you can always increase the speed, which will make it come out a little bit faster, but I don't increase the speed until I've gotten to the next setting because you don't want it to tear your noodle. And here. A beautiful, nice sheet of our pasta. So we've got 1 sheet down. We'll just rest it right there for now. Let's get our meat stirred up. Again, I'm going to break up and kind of toss it. Once it's all cooked away and we've got the pink gone, then we'll add in our sauce to let it simmer. Yeah. And I will say, pasta, I think homemade pasta can be a daunting task. It can make you feel like, oh, you're not sure you can do it, it seems like insurmountable, it's actually a lot easier. And you don't have to have a machine that roll it out. You can always use a rolling pin. I also have one of those old school pasta machines that you like attach to, or you can't attach it to a countertop, but to your table, and you can roll them out. I actually gave that to my kids to use as a Play-Doh roller because it works really well, and they love it whenever I set it up at their kids' table there. And they make their own little homemade pasta with it using their Play-Doh. But you can use one of those machines, or again, the good old rolling pin. Okay. Let that simmer here. I'm going to turn it down just a smidge. And then I'm going to just make sure our pasta sheet is long enough. Looks like it's perfect. A little bit, we'll cut off a little bit, but you see how we have got a nice size. I'll just rest it over there. I'm going to wrap out our next one. And I always say when you do it, make sure you always reset back to 1, because if you try to squeeze this through the smaller one, you're just going to shred your pasta. And then I always kind of work it out to make it a little bit thinner so you get a little less tearing that first time to go through, because again, you've got to flatten it out, and I'm not about to get my rolling pin and flatten it out. But go slow the first time through, the first numbers through, till you have it nice. And then I always fold it over on top of each other. That just allows it to even out a little bit. And give it nice through, and then we'll move it up to a number 2. We'll run it through, and then we'll have enough to make our first kind of row of pasta, and then we can get everything kind of going there. We'll go up to a bypass. The biggest trick is when you get past 3, you can skip, like you can go from 3 to 5, but don't skip more than a number on this, or you will again shred your pasta. And let's go. Get our last one through on this one. Beautiful. Okay. So again, I'm going to get to where, let's see if I want to do it 2. You know what? I think I'll cut them in that way, and I can do 2 sheets that way, and it will fit perfectly. Let me grab a knife. And that way, I actually think this might be perfect folded in half to do 2. It will. Got 1. And then I'm going to just do a little Frankensteining with it. It always doesn't have to be perfect with your sheets there. You just want it fairly close. And then I will take this kind of sheet and we'll add it there. But I always put my sauce first. We've got this one going for this round. Looks like our meat is just about cooked up. So again, I'm going to just go through, turn it down low, use my little shovel spoon here to kind of break it up. Perfect. And then our simplicity, using my good old Rayo's. There we go.
You have a question. What are the ingredients in your pasta?
So my pasta is really, really simple. I just use 2 cups of flour, and you can use all-purpose flour if you have 00, that's even better, or semolina. But 2 cups of flour, 3 large eggs, like a splash of olive oil, and about a pinch of salt. And then I do get my hands wet several times throughout the kneading process to work in a little bit of moisture. So it's probably about a tablespoon or so of water that gets added in, but I kind of knead it in over the time, you know what I mean? So it's not all in at one time until I've got this nice kind of smooth dough, it takes about 10 minutes of kneading to get it to where I want it to be. But then then I wrap it up with some plastic wrap, and it just needs to sit for a minimum of 30 minutes for that flour to hydrate. I've got a little bit more pasta sauce in my refrigerator, so I'm going to grab that so I can use the remaining bit of it. When I say a little bit, I had like half a cup because we save a half cup. There we go. So we're just going to mix it up. We have already those spices that we added into the meat. And this, again, is just a really simple, easy lasagna that I'm making. I'm making my meat lovers one. Now for the base part, what we're going to do is we're just going to try to get not so many meat chunks on it, but this is just kind of creating a saucy layer on the bottom, which helps flavor up the bottom of that first noodle. So I kind of scoop in a little bit of that sauce. It's fine if there's a couple meat chunks, but try to make it just as saucy as can be for that base one. There we go. And then we're going to pop these in. And the nice thing with it being fresh noodles is this doesn't take nearly as long to bake as a traditional lasagna because it cooks up really, really fast. We're going to add in our first sets of noodles here. There we go. And then we are going to do, because we did that little kind of secret sauce base on there, I'm going to take my ricotta and we're going to spread this out. And you want to spread this as thin as possible. You don't want it too thick or you're going to get kind of this just too much paste of it and you'll have more of a soupy lasagna. So spread it nice and thin on here. There we go. I'm going to kind of coat it all the way around. Give it a good splash up of it. Give it a nice kind of toss here. Beautiful.
And can you go over what's mixed with the ricotta?
Yes. The ricotta is, let me just get this cut to the size. So with our ricotta, I have about 16 ounces of ricotta, about a cup of Parmesan cheese, a cup of mozzarella cheese, and then we added a big heaping tablespoon of fresh, like a pesto, a nice kind of like refrigerator pesto. You can make it homemade if you have. And then we added about a teaspoon and a half of Italian seasoning, about a teaspoon of basil, half a teaspoon to a teaspoon of garlic salt. And then we mixed it kind of all the way up. Let's give this a nice little patchwork here. There we go. And you kind of mix it all together and boom, you've got there. Now you can definitely add in like chopped up spinach and fresh basil to jazz it up. A lot of times when I'm making my more veggie laden lasagna, I will do that. Okay, we're gonna get this next kind of layer in here. Now this is where you can really spread out your meat chunks and like fill it up nicely. This is where you're gonna get those nice little meaty chunks in there. And then we'll kind of pat it all the way around. And then I think I've got one more scoop. And there we go. And then I'm just kind of making it a nice even layer here. And then what I'm going to do is before we add in our next layer of noodles, which we'll roll out, we're going to add a sprinkle of mozzarella cheese. Not too thick because you don't want that cheese to be too much, but I do love a little base layer on it. Just a little light sprinkling. Okay. Let's get our next set of noodles going. I always like to kind of wrap it up because you don't want to leave your pasta dough exposed to the air too long, or it dries out a little bit, which means that you're going to get cracks in it when you try to roll it out. So when you're not rolling it, just keep it wrapped up in your either in a plastic bag or your saran wrap. And that just keeps that moisture in the dough because there's not a lot of extra liquid added to it. And that's what helps the pasta keep its shape. So we'll stretch this out. Make sure I go back to a 1. Now, I like to do mine on a 4, but you can definitely go thinner. If you go, I think 5 works really well. If you go much thinner than that, then you lose a bit of that stability in a thicker noodle. Here we go. Give it a good pull through. And then I like to fold it over again. This is just going to allow a bit more structure in it, and even it gives it a nice thick noodle. There we go. Then we're going to go to a 2. And then after we get to a 2, then you can turn it up and go a little bit faster on your mixer if you want to. So I can move it up just a smidge. And it will just run it through really fast. You just don't want to go too fast where your dough will cling and then it will tear, and then you've got to kind of start all over with that layer. And then let's get our last one going through here. There, nice. Perfect. And then try to make sure I measure it as best as possible right there. A little piece of meat on there. And no worries if you have to Frankenstein it a little bit if you put like your noodle too long on one side. And then I always, because our noodles aren't the most, one end is typically a little bit skinnier. You just take that piece, cut it off. And then what I like to do is anywhere that you need a little patch, you just layer that noodle on that patch there, just like that. And then we'll give it a nice little tap down. And then we're going to do our ricotta base here. And since this is a good size pan, I'm going to get, just 2 layers of the ricotta base in there. But if you have the actual lasagna pans, which go up really, really high, then you could go another layer for it. When you're making lasagna, you don't want to necessarily go to the tippy top because you'll get boil over, and then you'll create a huge mess in your oven to have to clean up. And I've done that several times. So I always make sure I leave just a little bit of room at the top so that sauce bubbles in, and we'll kind of thin it there. But here we've got our beautiful layer. And this is like a 9 by 13-inch pan. So this is making a good size lasagna. This can also make about 2 to 3 loaves as well for it. Okay, let's get this last noodles out here going. We're going to kind of break this one up. That way we have enough to go all the way through. Let's turn. Let's stretch this guy out and get him going. And again, I'm going to do my fold over. This is just going to allow it to be a little bit more even. Get them up. And a good stretch through.
Mary sent you again.
Well, thank you, Mary. We appreciate that. And we're going to go with our next one right through here to get our noodle on. There we go. And then I think, you know what? I'm going to run it one more through because I want to make this noodle stretch 2 layers. So there we go. So this is, if you go up one thinner, you can see it's just slightly thinner, but it will give you more noodle to go a little bit longer. And I want to make 2 more noodle layers. So I'm going to just stretch it a little bit farther. Let's see. Got it right there. So cut it kind of right in the middle. And then I know I'm just going to pre-cut that off because I already know I'm going to cut it off. There we go. And we'll Frankenstein this one up twice. Perfect. Pat it down. We're going to do our little meat sauce layer. And we'll spread this guy out. Perfect. And we're just going to make this nice, kind of get all of that meat on top of it, because also the juices from this sauce are going to sink down, and that's what's going to help cook these noodles up. But that's the nice thing again about using a fresh noodle, is that you don't have to use you don't have to boil them. And that's the nice thing. Now, I will say, if you don't have time to make your own homemade noodles, Rana does make a really good fresh pasta sheet. They're called Lasagna, and they are really good. Those are for when you don't have the time, but you want pretty good lasagna. That's what you're going to do. I'm going to use just a little bit of this sauce that we will spread a really thin layer on the top of this next one. Let's do our little sprinkle of cheese.
You have a question? Is this fresh egg pasta that you made?
Yes.
And is your meat sauce beef and pork?
Yes, it is a mixture of ground beef and mild Italian sausage, which I think just gives that nice kind of good mix to it. But you could definitely use all of one type or the other for it. I feel like a classic 90s lasagna was all ground beef. Okay, we've got that. Let's get this last noodle stretched out on here. Give it a good little smush out. It just makes it a little bit easier. And we're going to get this through. And this will allow it to get it out nice. Oh, did I not? There we go. If you don't have it back, it's impossible to roll it when it's too thick. So we'll get these noodles out and put that next layer on. Then we'll get this baking in the oven. And then we are going to get our breadsticks in the oven as well. I have those proofing in the oven, rising. And they're just a soft yeast dough breadstick. Let's get this guy through. There we go. Now, if you've never made homemade pasta before, you're going to feel like when you are making the dough that it is too dry and you need to add more liquid. Do not add too much more liquid. Add just enough, just wet your fingers, because when you add more liquid, it's going to give your pasta to be too soft and too wet later. So it's going to be dry, but once you wrap it up and you let it sit for 30 minutes to an hour, your pasta rehydrates, which it allows it to be nice and soft and malleable. Okay. I think we should be good on this sheet here.
Did you use bread flour or all-purpose?
So I use just all-purpose flour for this, but you can use like semolina flour, 00 flour if you want for it. They both kind of work really well. Bread flour makes your noodles a little bit more dense, so I would stick with all-purpose over a bread flour. because bread flour has a slightly higher protein content in it. Okay, let's get this last noodle out. And then we will put our cheese layer on the top and we'll get this guy baking. Because we're using fresh noodles, again, this is going to cook up a lot faster than with firmer noodles.
And did you use the egg whites as well?
I did. So this isn't just a yolk pasta. This is the whole one, the whole egg on it. It's just a little less waste. And it tastes fairly well. Now, if you use just the egg yolks, you're going to have a nice rich yellow color to your pasta. So the egg whites does make your pasta a little bit paler in color, but I find that it still gives you a really nice velvety, soft texture to it as well. Okay, let's Frankenstein this next one. Here we go. Beautiful. And then no need to waste any. We'll just put all of our little noodle scraps on there. And then we're just going to do, again, a really thin layer of sauce on top, just to kind of coat it up, because we're going to do a nice thick cheese layer. So this is where you just kind of pour your remaining bit. There shouldn't be too much. And you're just going to spread it around really thin. And this just allows that noodle to kind of cook up and get that flavor on both sides. And then we're going to use our remaining cheese, and this is where you're going to want to make a nice, good cheese layer on it. So I've got our mozzarella. Kind of coat it up. And then we're going to go over with Parmesan as well. So we have in our ricotta base, we have mozzarella and Parmesan as well. And then on top, we do the double of it. Coat it up, going through and using up the last of my things. Here we go. Now we're going to go pop this in the oven to bake up. We're going to get our breadsticks in, and then we're going to shape up some of our sourdough loaves that we prepped up earlier so that they'll be ready to bake up tomorrow. Well, let's go get these guys in the oven.
Do you have the recipe for the pasta posted anywhere?
I do not have the recipe posted for the pasta, but I can tell you what it is right now. And that way, if you don't write it down, you can always rewatch this video and find it. Really, really easy. You just take 2 cups of flour, all-purpose flour, semolina, or 00 flour, and you're going to put them on your counter. You're going to make a well, and then you're going to crack 3 eggs into that well, whole eggs, large eggs if possible, and you'll just stir with a fork inside that well, mix those eggs up. And you're going to add a splash, like a half a teaspoon of oil and like a pinch or 2 of salt. And you're going to kind of mix that in, and then you're going to knead the dough for about 10 minutes to get it all nice and like together. It's going to be a little bit dry, so if it's dry, as you're working, just constantly wet your hands to knead it in there. You're going to add about a tablespoon or so of water all the way through to it. And then you wrap it up in a plastic wrap and you let it sit for, about, 30 minutes to an hour minimum on there. And then it's ready to, roll out and cook up. So here we've got our homemade breadsticks. So these are yeast breadsticks that we're made up. They're a pretty simple recipe. I used about a cup of warm water. I added a tablespoon of yeast, 2 tablespoons of sugar, and about a teaspoon and a half of salt, and 3 cups of flour. Kneaded them all up together. And we are going to just sprinkle a little bit of garlic salt over them now. But when we come out, and a little bit of Italian seasoning, but when we bakes into the bread a little bit now. but then we're going to melt butter up. And when they come out, we'll brush them with the butter and some garlic salt and Parmesan cheese for just a nice little deliciousness. But I find a little bake before it works really well. So we're just going to give a nice shake over. And then just a little bit of Italian seasoning. And with these, you do 2 types of rise with them. So you let it rise for 30 to 40 minutes. Then you divide it into 12 pieces, roll them out into little snakes, you know, about yay big, about 7-8 inches long. And then you put them out and you let them rise again to where they kind of poof up. And then when they bake, they'll poof up some more. So
we get this question a lot. What do you do with all your leftovers?
Well, we rarely have any leftovers because we're a pretty large family. But if we do, I typically send all of my leftovers to my parents because I make all of their food for them as well. I want my breadsticks to kind of bake on the top rack. So I don't think they'll both fit up here. But let me see first. Sometimes I'm surprised. But I think this one's too big to fit this one. Nope, it's not. Look at that. Is it shut? Yes, it is. Okay. These cook for 12 minutes. And by then we take those out. Is it not shut? No, I think it is. I'm going to say it's shut, guys. They cook for 12 minutes and then we'll take them out and then we'll brush them with our garlic butter, which we'll make here in just a few seconds. While we're waiting for those to bake up, we are going to shape up our sourdough loaves. I've got a traditional one and then we're going to add in some cranberries to my cranberry orange one. So if you have questions about sourdough, now is the time to ask them because I feel like it's something that everybody wants to do, but they're scared to start it. But it is a really fun journey. And it's not as difficult as you think.
I got a question. How long does the lasagna bake?
So the lasagna bakes about, I want to say like 15 to 20 minutes. It doesn't take too long out of 400. You can bring it up to 425 or you can bring it down to 350 and cook it for about 30 or so minutes. But it cooks fairly fast because it is fresh and you have your meat sauces already cooked in it.
Does it take longer with the door cracked?
The door is not cracked. Maybe. I feel like I'm going to just jiggle this a couple of times. It's shut. It is shut. It is shut. So if it's not, I blame my husband. But theoretically, if the door was cracked, yes, it would take a little bit longer. It would be like the broiling process.
Is that sweater from Buc-ee's?
Yes, it is. It's the good old. I have like 3 Christmas Buc-ee sweaters. I got this one this year, but I have a red one from last year because we always have soccer tournaments near Buc-ee's where they're always past a Buc-ee's, and I love my Buc-ee's. And the only thing is I do have the regular sweatshirt, but I wish their Halloween they would make a sweatshirt because I, as you know, live in sweatshirts year round. It could be 100 degrees outside. I'm going to be in sweatshirts because I love sweatshirts. And I've always been like that. I was a kid and I would visit my grandparents in Spain. I would wear sweatshirts. It would be like 100 degrees and there was no AC and I was still in a sweatshirt.
Do your kids ever put in dinner requests?
Yes, they do all the time. Now, some of their dinner requests are not feasible because if my eldest daughter had what she wanted, it would be steak every single day. And I don't know why she thinks we live on a steak budget, but we don't have a steak every day. And not just any steak. She wants a filet mignon because she just thinks those are the best steaks and they are delicious. But again, who has a steak every day budget? But they do put in requests on there and I try my best to work them in. But ultimately I have to say at the end of the day what we're eating. And if I have the ingredients and they make a request, I will try to make it. If I don't have the ingredients, then tough luck. But I do, especially my husband's request for salmon. He just absolutely loves salmon, and I try to make it for him as much as I can.
At least once a week.
Hey, last time it was steelhead trout. Okay, let's get our dough shaped up. I always start with a generous sprinkling of flour because more flour, the better. And we're going to let it kind of wing out. This has been proofing for about, I want to say 4 or 5 hours now, so it should be good. We had it on our, did my shape and fold, and we have it there. It just needs to work its way out. If you're patient, you can sit and watch the fun drop forever. If you're like me, I'm like, get out of the bowl.
In your opinion, what's the difference in taste between sourdough and all-purpose or regular?
So sourdough bread has kind of this tart flavor to it, although you can get really mild sourdough. I feel like the main difference is the crust. The sourdough crust is chewier and just has a nicer texture, while just a regular yeast bread has a softer, kind of more dry crust to it. So I feel like those are the main differences to it. Now, if you use like a wheat starter or wheat in your thing or rye in your sourdough, it's going to give it a much stronger fermented flavor versus just a really, just like a regular flour one. Okay, we're going to do, this is called the lamination process, where you stretch out your dough. No idea why it's called laminating, because as my teacher's background, I think of laminating as sticking something between two pieces of plastic that then gets run through like a heater to melt them together. So I'm not sure why this is called laminating. But that is the technique. So if we ever say you got to laminate your bread, you're stretching it out. And then we're going to do our shaping. And I don't put like crazy amount of, shaping in it. But what I'll do is I'm going to fold it over kind of like this. You're making like almost like a little burrito here. And then we're just going to roll up. Make sure your surface is well floured so that you don't have a lot of sticking, because sourdough is a high hydration bread in comparison to like a yeast-based bread, which means that if you don't have it floured well or your hands are wet, it's going to stick to you. So what I'm doing is I'm kind of twisting up these edges in here so that when you flip it over, you have this nice base part. This is going to go into our floured banneton basket, which has a kind of a cheesecloth over it. And then my next part is what I call the stitching. And so I kind of stitch it together to seal it up. And you just want to make sure when you do it that you're not pulling this base layer too much to where you rip it, because then you just don't have as nice of a scoring area on it when you work. Now, there are people who will do lots of crazy shaping. They like shape a lot. I don't do that. This is how I feel like they do their crazy. There they are. They're like this. I don't do that. I just do my little roll and like my little thing. It's a whole thing, guys. Trust me, it is. You'll see it. It is. You don't need to do that. But if you want to do that, you definitely can. I feel like there's really no wrong way to do a sourdough once you figured out your way. I even had, like last year, we had Sweet Teddy make up a sourdough loaf. And, he was 3 at the time. But he's 4 now. But he just threw ingredients together. And we baked a sourdough up because I was like, hey, this actually looks like it's going to bake up. It feels like it has the right texture. It baked up and it was delicious. So I figured if a 4-year-old can throw it together, you guys can too. You just have to know a couple of the steps. And honestly, you just need to make sure that your starter is to the right point. If you try to do a starter that you haven't fed it, within the proper time frame, or it's just not quite active enough, then it's going to fall flat. But if your starter's good, the rest will work out. This is right now we've got orange zest and fresh orange juice in here. And I say orange juice like the little cuties, little mandarin oranges. We're going to put in some fresh cranberries in this because this is going to be a cranberry orange sourdough loaf. Now for these loaves, my traditional loaf, which is actually the base that I used in both of these loaves essentially, But for the traditional loaf, this is my big loaf. And I do have that recipe card available for everyone, as well as videos on how you can make your own starter and how to do all of this, from start to finish on there. But it starts off with 150 grams of an active starter that you fed within the last 4 to 8 hours. And then you're going to add, sprinkle a little bit of flour on here. You're going to add 565 grams of warm water, and then a tablespoon of salt. And then you add 750 grams of unbleached bread flour.
And question, how old is your starter?
This starter is about a year old. So last year in January, December through January, we went on a long cruise. We were gone for 10 days, and I forgot to stick my starter in the fridge, and it molded, so I had to just start all over. So this starter that I've been going is a good year on it, and it's just, I will say, I made a great couple loaves of bread right away from it, but it became fail-proof after about a month and a half, 2 months is when it was really developed. Where if I neglected it for 3 days, it didn't need to be, nurtured back to health or whatnot. I now am very, I do remember to put it in the fridge when I go on long trips. But that is key there because it can mold. And I know some people are like, you can scrape it off. And I'm like, why risk it? I'll take a week to make a new one. Okay, as you can see the little orange zest in here, all in there. So that's just there. The difference between my main loaf, the one, is I took about 30 grams of water out. So I only used 535 grams of warm water in this. And then I used the juice from 3 mandarin oranges and the zest from 3 mandarin oranges in this, which is about 35 grams of juice and then about 5 grams of zest. Now for this one, what we're going to do next is we're going to add in some cranberries. You can use dried cranberries that you've soaked in an orange juice and then patted dry, or Sprite. You want to soak them though, but fresh cranberries are going to give you a really, really tart bit of flavor here. Now they're going to be a little bit tricky to roll in there. They're just like blueberries. But we're going to spread these all out. And I like to add them in the lamination process. You can always add them in the stretch and fold phase, but they get spread out a little bit nicer when they're in the lamination process. So we're just going to move them around. You don't want them too close to each other because, again, like a blueberry, they're going to have a little burst of juice in them, and that can make your dough a bit soggy if you have too many in there. But one big loaf is going to give you about a half, I want to say like a half a bag of you'll get with a big loaf. Okay, we've got these nice and spread out as best as I can. There's going to be a little roll, and that's always the fun part. So now we're going to fold kind of this part in, and then what makes this even more fun is we're going to put some more in this middle layer area.
Can you use dehydrated berries?
So dehydrated berries definitely work really well. They're a bit sweeter in there, and they puff up. So they actually work well with it. So I've done a lot with them on there. You don't have to worry about having the issue of it being a bit too juicy. Before we roll this up, let me grab our breadsticks out of the oven. Time flies when you're having fun. These are looking gorgeous. And then we're going to brush them with some butter here in just a second. But they've got just kissed beautifully. And our lasagna is looking fabulous. We'll let that continue until we're ready to brush these up. And then we'll be ready to serve up dinner. So these are looking gorgeous. Okay, let's get our butter melting in here. And then we'll try to do it with my floury hands as best as possible. But we're going to brush these with a little bit of melted butter. So we're going to melt our butter, and then we'll brush it over, and then we'll sprinkle it. We'll mix a little bit of garlic salt in here. Just a little bit of cheese. Let's take that there. And then we'll flavor, and that's going to give these the best flavor. Okay. I'll start over and things and we'll get that going here. But this again is our yeast no sourdough, our yeast breadsticks here. Really simple. I used about a cup of warm water, a tablespoon of yeast, 2 tablespoons of sugar, about a teaspoon and a half of salt, and 3 cups of flour. Knead it together. You let it rise for about 30 to 45 minutes, and then you shape it up. You divide it into 12 sections and you shape it up. And then you let it rise again before baking for about 30 to 45 minutes. So it does take like an hour to an hour and a half before they're ready to bake, but they are going to be delicious.
You have a question. Is it a problem if a cranberry pops or breaks open?
It's not a big deal with it. It just means that you're going to have a cranberry on your crust, which means that in the baking process, it can toast up a little bit. This is where you've got to be gentle with it. So you can see when you hear, as my ring, of course, snags it, but you can see them bumping through on there. That's why I don't do a lot of the crazy shaping, which is a thing, guys. But I just kind of throw it in here, and then we're just going to do, and you're just going to gently pull up and seal this out. The nice thing about sourdough is it's going to all mold back in together. And when you score it, you're going to probably pop one out. Really, all it means is that the juice of the cranberry will be exposed to the high heat, which can cause it to get a little bit darker in color, but it doesn't ever taste burnt to me. It just doesn't look as nice. There we go. And I will say you can see the size difference. So these are the exact same measurements, but the natural juice and sugar in the orange causes this one to rise a little bit faster, a little bit poofier, and which means it will have a slightly more airy base on it than their traditional, but the traditional always is my favorite, no matter what. I'm gonna wash my hands here. Now, these loaves of bread, they are not ready to bake up. With sourdough, in order to get your best kind of pop on them, is they need to cold proof for a minimum of 12 hours up to 36 hours, 48 hours. 48 hours do they cold proof. After that, then you kind of mess with their ability to, their structure, their protein structure and how they hold. So I'll cover them up with my little bread covers and pop them in the fridge. And then when I'm ready to bake them, I preheat my Dutch oven to 500 degrees for about 30 minutes. Then I bake for 20 minutes at 500 with the lid on, and then 20 minutes at 450 with the lid off. And then you have delicious bread. Okay, let's sprinkle in a little bit of garlic salt here. And where did I put it? There it is. So we have a little bit over the top, but you're going to put a little bit in your butter. Give you that nice garlic bread flavor. And then we've got our basting brush, so just give it a good stir. And this is what makes these a dream, guys. This is where all those flavor really pops in. And so you're just going to coat it up, and we'll do one brushing now, and then right before we serve, we're going to brush it one more time because this is going to soak in. And then once we get these covered up, we're going to go grab our lasagna out of the oven, and then we are going to be ready to serve up dinner, which is pretty good for some homemade lasagna with homemade noodles and homemade breadsticks. Snazzy. Okay, I've got a little bit of that left. Let's go. I'm going to get this ready because we're going to add and put that right there because it will be hot. Slide that guy over. Okay, we've had our lasagna in probably for about 20 minutes now at 400. You can see it is bubbling beautifully. We've got that nice melted, toasty, bubbly top to it. This thing weighs a ton because this is a cast iron baking dish, which I absolutely love for cooking because it keeps your food warm for a long time. So it's great if you have to let it kind of sit and do prep for it. Let me just grab a napkin here. But this is, again, is our delicious, lasagna with our homemade egg noodles. We also seasoned up our ricotta with mozzarella and Parmesan cheese, a little bit of pesto, and just all these great flavors that are coming together. Let's get ready to serve this guy up. And then, of course, we've got our delicious homemade breadsticks, which who doesn't love a good breadstick? And then I want to grab a spatula that's firm enough to kind of cut through our lasagna here. I know I'm going to try to grab this, so I'm going to grab an oven mitt.
You have a quick question. You don't cover the lasagna when you bake it?
I do not cover the lasagna because this is a fresh lasagna that cooks up a lot faster. If you have to cook your lasagna more than 30 minutes, you're going to want to tent it with aluminum foil to prevent that cheese from burning. But since these are fresh pasta noodles, they're going to cook up really, really fast. The sauce was hot when we added it on there. So part of the ingredients were already pre-cooked going into it, so it allows it to cook up a lot faster. Okay, let's cut through these noodles to give us a delicious. I'm going to cut this side because I'm going to try to pick it up and I don't want it to spill anywhere. But here, and just see that beautiful, delicious homemade lasagna with our sausage and ground beef sauce. And the ricotta is seasoned with pesto and mozzarella and Parmesan cheese in it, as well as Italian seasoning. And then we have our homemade breadsticks, but just look how soft and delicious they are. So they're nice and fluffy and soft and delicious. Look, golden brown crust on here, but a really simple and delicious, but pretty much everything made from scratch dinner for, a nice, easy weeknight. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us here. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I try to do live cooking shows every single day, kind of show you what we're making for our family and hopefully teach you guys something along the way. Again, we do upload all of our videos to the link on our page. So if you ever want to recreate any of our meals at home, you can just go to our page, search for what we made. So we've got our lasagna and our homemade breadsticks. And you can always watch and cook along with me again. We also have a link to our Amazon storefront that has all of our different cooking gear and gadgets in it. I've got my bakeware, my cutting boards, my mixer, my pasta roller out. I've got them all in there for you guys to check out. But again, thank you so much for joining us here. Don't forget to like and subscribe.